I'm Nick White. I'm vice president of Celestia Labs, and I've been on the team for the past over 4 years. And Celestia is the first modular blockchain, which, I mean, modular is a buzzword, but basically you can think of Celestia as an L1 that's built for a future where applications get built as app-specific chains. So we're scaling this raw resource of block space, which you can think of as like bandwidth for all of Web3. And we think that's just the future of how we're actually going to build applications that people use every day, and Web3 will go mainstream. So that's what we're working on.
I love it. Thanks for the intro. I mean, um, I would say the majority of my audience is on a little bit of a different side of crypto. It definitely skews more trading, Sol on chain, ETH on chain, meme coins, all type of stuff. Less on the infra side. I mean, can you give like a breakdown of what a genuine use case for Celestia would be and how people are using it right now?
Yeah, good question. So there are a bunch of apps already live on Celestia. The thing is that you kind of have to change your mental model of what an application is. Like a lot of people think of applications today as smart contracts deployed on Ethereum L1 or deployed on Arbitrum or Base or Solana. But we think of, when you zoom out in the future, people are going to be building apps that are these vertically integrated sort of virtual blockchains, which are what rollups are essentially. And there's a lot of parallels here with how Web2 evolved, where now most web apps that you use are these virtual servers, like they're standalone own computers essentially. So anyway, not to get too deep into the infra speak, but some of the big apps that are already live or are coming out are things like Converge, which is Athena's institutional DeFi chain in collaboration with the RWA sort of team called Securitize. And that's a chain that already has $1 billion in TVL committed, but it's going to be a RWA focused sort of like institutional DeFi chain that I think will be really successful based on the previous success of like how well Athena is doing. I think it's one of the breakout apps of this cycle. And so I think, that will be something to definitely watch. We have another application, for example, Towns, which is imagine like a decentralized version of Discord or Slack,
Okay.
but where the creators and curators of these communities get to actually like take in revenue for the value that they're creating through like creating these communities. Like you could probably spin up a Towns server, and then you could be making money yourself as sort of like a content creator with your community and your fans. They've already done $30 million in revenue. So really excited for them, and they're continuing to grow. The founder, actually, Ben, is a serial founder from Web2. So his previous startup was acquired, I think, by Epic Games. Other apps like Plume, which is like another RWA chain. They have like 220 million in TVL. But probably the one that your audience would be most familiar with, or like the app vertical and category, and one that we're really excited for, are exchanges. So, I mean, people are probably very familiar with Hyperliquid, right? And they're, I would say, that one of the breakout successful apps this cycle, clearly. And what they've shown is that we can actually build exchanges that give you feature parity with centralized exchanges, but build them on chain. And we're seeing a big push for more and more people, more and more teams, including centralized exchanges, trying to build competitors. And Celestia is a big part of this kind of unlock because for two reasons. One is why couldn't we build these exchanges on chain before? There wasn't enough throughput. So one of Celestia's real big contributions to the space, I think, will be just the raw amount of block space and like throughput, bandwidth for applications that we're going to provide. And then on the other side, these exchanges need really, really low latency. And if you're building on a general purpose L1, even the fastest ones like Solana, the latency is too slow to be competitive with centralized exchanges. And when you build an exchange as a rollup, you can get kind of the best of both worlds, where you can have a single sequencer with and you can co-locate with it. You can get 5 millisecond latency, just like you would, comparable latency with Binance. But then on the back end, because you're posting all your data to a decentralized L1, and it's all going on chain in block space, the app is non-custodial and it is decentralized in the key way that users care about. So like the people are calling these things, CLOBs, central limit order book exchanges. And there's a bunch building on Celestia already. One is Hibachi. Its differentiation is that it has privacy preserving trading. So, you won't end up like James Wynn if you're a whale trader and get your position spot like liquidated and hunted. And there's a few others. Rise is a really big chain that's building a bunch of clubs and a few more that I can't mention right now. But that's an app vertical that we're really excited about. I think we'll see, and hopefully some of your audience will use and be familiar with.
Yeah, shout out to James Wynn. Okay, can I ask you, Nick, like, why is Celestia so hated and there's so much anger, it feels like, towards Celestia on the crypto Twitter timeline?
That's a good question. I think it comes down to psychology partly. I think, and the hype cycle, right? So every technology goes through a hype cycle where you have the idea, then you have this peak of inflated expectations, and you have a trough of disillusionment, and then you have a plateau of productivity. And I feel like Celestia went through this peak of massively inflated expectations in 2023, around like shortly after launch, and people got really, really excited. And then the reality has been that to ship this vision, which is a total paradigm shift in how people are going to build and use Web3, is going to take a little while. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not like, okay, this thing ships and then the next day everything else has sort of fallen into line. It's like there's a bunch of other pieces that need to be in place, and it's a slow buildup to the point where all of a sudden overnight, then all of a sudden everything is different. So I think traders, I guess investors can sometimes get messed up on the time frame, right? And the reality is, like, building technology, especially crypto infrastructure, is a long time horizon activity, and it just takes time to be successful. And I think Celestia is, as a team, is extremely focused on doing what's right to win in the long term, in the end game. And we're not afraid to sort of just grind it through and do what we know will be best for the product and best for the protocol. So I think that's a big part of it. It's just sort of like a misalignment of expectations and duration of those expectations.
Yeah, I think that's a sick take. Going back to the James Wynn thing really quick, I got like a little jumpy. How does like utilizing Celestia tech avoid a James Wynn situation where a massive whale is like getting their positions hunted?
Great question. So if you're building an exchange, right, on chain, then depending on the design, your orders are going to be posted on chain. So then anyone can see not only like what the order book is, but also even identify, hey, this is from this guy's address. And so they know, and they'll be able to tell like where you're going to be liquidated, right? So you end up in a situation where there's more information than probably what you want. The order book itself, where the orders are, needs to be transparent, but like the amount of leverage and all those things should probably not be. And so that's, one of the issues with Hyperliquid. I mean, Jeff, I think, takes a position that is actually a good thing. I don't know if people would agree. I think there's a reason why centralized exchanges don't publish that information. I would think that if it's a good thing, they would probably be doing, they'd be publishing everyone's positions. And so how does using Celestia solve that? Well, we collaborated with Hibachi to build this private DA solution, meaning that you can post orders on chain in a way that the information is encrypted, but it's still verifiable. So you're still able to prove things about what's happening on chain, but the actual stuff that's happening on chain is not transparent for the whole world to see. So it's different than, and so it's transparent to the operator, the roll-up operator. It's kind of isomorphic to an exchange. The centralized exchange knows everyone's stuff. They can see everything, but users can't, and the rest of the world, the rest of the world is a black box. So it provides you the same guarantees. It's not full privacy. There are certain, teams that are building a fully private exchange where literally no one has any idea what's happening. That's not this, but we think it provides the right amount of privacy to be useful and like for the use case that people want. And the cool thing about this is that we're seeing this demand for this kind of privacy pop up in a lot of other places. So not just with Hibachi, but a lot of institutional users, if they're going to build a chain, again, they don't want the state, they don't want everyone's balances to be fully public. So it's kind of the right threshold of privacy that's practical and achieves what people want. And I think it actually kind of expands the universe of what like the total addressable market is for block space, because it means that like you can do things on chain that you probably wouldn't have done before.
A couple days ago I had this guy Machi Big Brother on, who you might be familiar with. He's like a pretty big whale. And
Yeah.
on this getting hunted thing, he was basically just saying that basically every centralized exchange has these trading houses that sole purpose is to basically hunt down the liquidations of the biggest open positions and the biggest whales on their exchanges. Like, is this just a thing that's happening? Like, this is like a different world to me. Is this like a thing that's happening everywhere from every exchange?
Dude, you know what? I don't know the inner workings of exchanges and like the exchange business, but I have heard people talking about that, and that's another sort of like rationale of why crypto could eventually in the future be even better than just this solution I just described, where even the operator of the rollup has no idea what your positions are. But I think we're still, I know Hibachi wants to get there, but so far the technology is just not there to make it practical. Like proving is too expensive and too slow, and a lot of other reasons why like it's not practical to do. But yeah, I mean, wherever there's like an incentive, right, to sort of like cheat, it probably will happen. And that's why we do things on chain too. Maybe there's a way, actually, another solution, which is you could prove that the rollup operator is hunting your position in some way because it is on chain and verifiable. I don't know.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, yeah, thanks for the take on that. I'm curious, like, what do you think happened to the airdrop thesis for Celestia?
Yeah, good question. So, I think the airdrop thesis for Celestia came from the sort of like broader Cosmos ecosystem carryover, and I think there's also a moment in time in crypto where airdrops are very sort of like common, and the Celestia team that's never been part of what Celestia is about, and so it kind of like took on a life of its own. And then I think the reality is that even though a bunch of teams launched chains on Celestia, like the airdrops as a mechanism kind of had their time, and I think proved to not be that great for a lot of reasons. And there's a lot of teams that did airdrops. I think Celestia and Hyperliquid are one of the few like airdrops I think actually went over well. But a lot of teams that did airdrops, it actually blew up in their face. Like the community was like pissed, even though they're giving away money for free. So I think airdrops are kind of like broken independently. And yeah, it was kind of unfortunate that a narrative of like, hey, if you stake TIA, there's going to be a bunch of airdrops for you, took hold and kind of got really big. But that was never really an intention of Celestia.
Yeah, the airdrop thesis largely hasn't really happened. The Hyperliquid one is sort of a unique situation, probably the biggest one ever in crypto. But it hasn't really played out at all. How would you say that increased activity on Celestia and like increased usage of Celestia will impact like price mechanics long term?
Yeah. So Celestia, again, going back to sort of the initial metaphor that I started out with to kind of explain Celestia, think of it like an infrastructure provider that provides like bandwidth, which is like block space for anyone to run whatever, crypto Web3 app they want to run. And it's the same way that a cloud provider like Amazon or Microsoft Azure, they charge for like the compute that you consume to run your Web2 app. Celestia charges for the amount of block space bandwidth essentially that you consume. And so the bet is that the demand for block space is going to grow tremendously. Like in the same way that, in the internet, you're probably too young to remember this, but there was dial-up where you literally used like your phone line and your internet connection was slow as hell. Then there was broadband, which was like a step forward. And then, nowadays we're on fiber and we have so much bandwidth that we can do crazy shit. Like we're streaming live right now. Like, 10, 20 years ago, it would have been totally infeasible to ever imagine that we could be live streaming what we're live streaming right now because the internet was just not fast enough. And so Celestia is sort of a bet that Web3 is going to go through a similar transition. So I would say like Ethereum was, you can think of as dial-up, and Solana was sort of like broadband, like leveled it up to where we can do more interesting things. And Celestia is going to be, I think, fiber equivalent, where we're going to do like orders of magnitude more throughput than Solana because we're just focused only on block space, just raw block space. And, we hope, like also look around, like with the success of Hyperliquid, with all of the regulations that's being passed, we're in a moment where I think we're poised as an industry for tremendous growth in so many different areas. And there's going to be a race to bring finance on chain. And it's not just all the new players like Hyperliquid, it's all the centralized exchanges, it's all the TradFi exchanges and banks. And if you don't think that there's going to be an absolute explosion in demand to transact on chain and an explosion in demand for block space, then I don't know why you're really in crypto anyway. Like crypto, if you don't believe that like everyone in the world is going to be using crypto on a daily basis one day, then what are you really here for? And like Celestia is, I think, the cleanest bet on that future of like gigabytes and gigabytes of data throughput per second. And so anyway, getting back to your question, how does that, so like, if we get to that world where there's that much demand and then that block space is being consumed on Celestia, the fees accrue to the protocol. And so it's very much a at scale business. Mm-hmm. And it's one that, is like a long-term play.
You made this tweet, I don't know, a couple hours ago. It's kind of a sick tweet. And you were like, I have it right here. Like basically the Celestia's goal is to be a Web3 equivalent to AWS, which I used to bot sneakers, and I would use AWS servers all the time. How big?
Nice.
Yeah. How big and how much does Celestia become worth if it becomes the Web3 equivalent to AWS? It's a pretty massive vision.
Yeah, good question. So it's very hard to project. I mean, I really don't, and I try not to talk about price directly or anything like that. But I think people, like you said, I was actually having a conversation with someone. I was talking about like AWS, blah, blah, blah. And then they were like, they hadn't, most people have no idea what the fuck AWS is. You do because you used it. But basically AWS, Azure, GCP, these are all cloud providers that basically give you the ability to deploy your own computer and have it, run programs for you, right? And it's customizable. It's, fully elastic and scalable. It's like the utility. It's like the utility infrastructure for the traditional web, essentially. And what's crazy is the market, if you were to pull out AWS from Amazon and make it its own standalone business, its market cap would be roughly $1.5 trillion.
Whoa.
Azure would be worth $1 trillion. GCP would be worth $600 billion. So these are these sleeper things that people, when you think of Google or Amazon or Microsoft, you don't think about their cloud business as a normal consumer and user, right? You think of the apps that you use, like, oh, I go on Amazon and I buy some shit, or I, Google something, search, or I use Google Docs, whatever. But you don't think about the fact that behind like one of the biggest drivers of their valuation and their revenue and their profit is like providing compute. And so again, like, how does that translate into Web3? I'm not saying that, oh, the Web3 cloud provider is going to be equally valuable, but I think it's a similar kind of opportunity where, and again, that's some of the things that people love to hate on about Celestia is like, oh, well, it doesn't, users don't interact with it. It is a B2B block space, and I think L1s are fundamentally a B2B business. That's the way I see it. And, you might not know that you're using a chain that uses Celestia under the hood, but you are, and it's actually even if it's a very boring B2B business, it's something that's extremely profitable. And so I think that's like what, the end game is. And so I think it will be extremely valuable at some point. Like that this category of like the L1 provider for block space.
Yeah, 1.5 trillion is a pretty massive vision. Do you think like the fat chain thesis, like Solana getting so massive, is bearish or sort of devalues the Celestia long-term thesis?
No, I mean, I think the fat protocol thesis is wrong in the sense of the value will not accrue exclusively to the L1 infrastructure layer. I think that a majority, in the same way that if you look at Web2 again, right? Like Netflix is built on top of AWS. They're a customer of AWS. They are a super profitable, valuable business, publicly traded company, right? So the application of Airbnb or Netflix, whatever, is extremely valuable. And I think but also the underlying layer of AWS captures enough value in aggregate across all these different apps to also be extremely valuable, and probably more valuable than any single app on its own. Mm-hmm. But I think like the total aggregate value of the application layer should be and must be bigger than the underlying infrastructure layer. That's I think the only way it makes sense. Like people aren't gonna, and again, like, I think the flaw in a model like Solana is that they assume, well, I don't know if they still assume this, but they think that the L1 is going to capture the priority fees and the MEV from the applications. And I just don't think that that's incentive aligned, incentive compatible long term. Like long term, applications are going to want to capture their fees and their MEV for themselves, because they own the user relationship.
Yeah.
And so whether L1s like it or not, like that's not a revenue stream that they should try to count on or capture. They should try to be the best infrastructure provider for applications and just do a very, like, do it at scale. That's where I feel like the long term, like that's how the value kind of shakes out, 10 years from now.
I like the Netflix comp. That makes sense. I like the Netflix comp. I guess one of the last things I want to ask you is like, what do you think is the biggest misconception of Celestia? Like, where do you think the narrative got misconstrued, especially on the crypto Twitter side of things?
I mean, there's a lot of things I think like people love to FUD Celestia and there's a lot of, I would say, just kind of misinformed FUD that people assume is true, but is completely false. I think, you've been through being accused of total BS stuff, but people just love to fucking amplify that stuff. So that's a big part of it. The Celestia team is extremely high integrity, extremely locked in. Like a bunch of the accusations are just like totally off base. But then a bigger thing is I think people think of Celestia as a data availability layer, which is a terrible term because it makes you think it's some kind of like middleware component, right? Or people think like, oh, it's something that runs alongside Ethereum to help Ethereum scale rollups. And that is true. But the mental model you should use for Celestia is that it's an L1, just like Solana or Ethereum. And that's what it should be compared to. And a lot of people think of it as like, oh, I don't know, some meaningless kind of like minor sidecar middleware thing. And the reality is Celestia is actually going after what I think is the biggest category in crypto to date, which is like to be the security layer of Web3, to be the place that settles all the transaction volume and provides the bandwidth necessary to scale Web3 in this next era of adoption that I think we're entering in.
Nick White, dude, it was awesome. It was a pleasure. I appreciate you for coming on. Is there anything you want to sign off on? Anything you're excited you guys are about to launch? Anything you want to leave the audience with while I still have you?
There's a lot to look forward to, so people should stay tuned. We just shipped Lotus, which locks staking rewards, reduces issuance. We got another upgrade coming in Q3, which is going to be scaling the block size even more. Clobs, more exchanges launching. Converge, hopefully going live soon. So a bunch more sort of demand and new apps on the horizon. So thanks again, Thread, for having me on. This is great.
Nick White, absolute pleasure, man. Thanks for the time, dude. Thanks for coming on. Much